Mila unexpectedly becomes the Queen Luna in a fierce confrontation with the werewolves, but her acceptance of this new identity seems not to be voluntary. What is the real relationship between her and Roman? Does she really want to be his mate? What is Roman's true plan? Does he really intend to destroy humanity? Explore the secrets of the Wolf Moon. Subscribe to join the adventure. Chapter 19. I wanted to feel entirely relieved and ecstatic about Diana's news, but for some reason it only grew to make me nervous as a few more days passed by. A part of me wanted to just immediately tell everyone about it, but another part could remember Diana's pleas. It would be the worst thing ever if I slipped up and this put her in danger. Either way, I had to keep telling myself it was a win. It was yet one more reason for the packs to rethink their ways. It was another reason for Roman to reconsider whatever plans he had for humankind. The end of the werewolves wasn't as near as he suspected. So why was I still so nervous? Would he still want to move forward, even knowing the last of the curses was lifted? They lifted all the curses. I was sitting in front of the lake where that strange ritual had happened under the cloak of night a bit over a month ago, my knees to my chest with my arms wrapped around them comfortably. I kept being drawn to this place and I wasn't sure why. Was it similar to the crones within the abandoned temple? If I stepped into it, would I feel the water on my skin? I was here on this peaceful night because I couldn't sleep. I found myself lying in bed with my mind twisting and turning over the situation that was my life. So far, my new title as Queen Luna hadn't changed my situation much compared to before I'd gained it, but I was certain it was only because I hadn't completed the steps needed to truly become it. Would I need to know how to fully shift? I looked at my hands absently, flexing my fingers as I remembered the power that coursed through them when they were shifted. I had a sharp image of my hand in Lillian's chest and immediately clasped my hands into fists, wincing in response. They lifted all the curses. Diana's words were bothering me. It was true, their goddesses brought back mates and now even birth, but did they really break all the curses? The oracles had been banished, but if they were still here, would their connection to the goddesses be revived, or is that link still severed as Cynthia had told me? And Roman? Roman Stone. He was still immortal, wasn't he? It bothered me. This entire messy situation began with him, didn't it? I was relieved the wolves weren't doomed and they finally could be happy once more, but wouldn't that turn things back to the way they were before the blessings were taken away? Roman had still been cursed, then an angry soul tormented among those he couldn't allow himself to deeply care for. I knew the entire reason I had begun this entire quest, the reason I had decided to stay in this village instead of running home, when I had the chance, was to protect humanity, and more specifically the ones I had left behind. In that time, my life had been expanded further than I ever had imagined before, and I had grown to desire a sort of happiness to be given to the wolves as well. Or maybe peace. Now, there seemed to be another desire picking at my spirit. Roman was still cursed. Even if he decided not to harm the humans and allowed me to go home to live my human life, he would still be cursed. It bothered me. The creature within me stirred as I remained gazing into the surface of the lake in deep thought. I paused when I felt the twinge and then dropped my arms to push myself to my feet quickly. I considered running away, as I had been doing for a while now, but I knew I couldn't keep running forever. Plus, I didn't like Roman thinking I was completely terrified of him. I wasn't. Maybe. Roman stepped into view and it was breathtaking. He paused when he saw me, as though he weren't expecting me, but he must have if he could feel me as I felt him. You're not going to try to avoid me. His voice carried easily over the peaceful tune of nature in the night. My heart began to pick up pace just at the sight of him, but his question made it only worse. I shook my head wordlessly. Roman stepped towards me, beginning to close the distance between us warily. His eyes slipped from me to the lake just briefly before turning back to me. Were you looking for guidance from the goddesses? He asked me, sarcasm slipping through his tone before he cleared his throat and added more politely, in the past, there were talented oracles that could do it even with puddles, so I'm sure a lake wouldn't be too difficult for someone like you. I considered several snappy comebacks. If I said yes, would you ban me from even drinking water? I considered asking if he would think of allowing those oracles, who did survive, to come back to the packs once the blessings of the goddesses all came back. My mind thought over ways to immediately make him angry, to feel that heat even in my own veins, if only to give me that familiarity I was more comfortable with when dealing with him. They lifted all the curses. Except for his. Why did I care? I wasn't, I admitted honestly, turning to look at the lake myself with a frown. The goddesses and I don't really get along like that. You're the first wolf I've ever known to be favored by all three goddesses. I think you're mistaken, Roman responded, and the annoyance I expected to come hand in hand with such a statement from him didn't follow. He was acting oddly respectful. Well, I think you're the only one cursed by all of them, so I guess we make quite a pair, don't we? I said with a nervous half laugh. Two of them. I paused. What? I was only cursed by two of them, Roman corrected me. I could guess which two he spoke of, but it still surprised me. I was used to him openly hating all the goddesses, as one being. Even after all this time, it seemed he still didn't blame every one of them as equally as I thought. You shouldn't be out here by yourself. You shouldn't go anywhere by yourself. I finally turned my gaze back to him. Roman was standing only a few steps in front of me now. His scent was drifting in the air with the breeze and catching the attention of that beast within me in response. I tensed, balling my hands into a fist before releasing and repeating again. I'm not by myself, I answered quietly. If you give up your title, you would be free to do as you wish without worrying about challenges or attempts on your life. Roman ignored my comment, but his voice had grown rougher. And so, we were back to this topic. We could find a volunteer to take your place, stage a challenge to relinquish the title, and leave you with your life in the end. That sounds humiliating. No thanks. A heat of anger flashed through me, from Roman, but also from me as well. The image of some volunteer taking the title and taking him was enough to bother me further. I sighed, running my hand over my arm as if to rub away that heat. My sudden frustration made me brave. I already told you. I don't want anyone else by your side. It doesn't matter who's by my side. It doesn't change anything, Roman said carefully, hiding what thoughts were crossing his mind from appearing on his face. But the heat from his anger had faded almost the moment I told him the truth. His words still stung even without anger. Is that true? I asked him. I knew he meant it wouldn't change how he ran the pack or maybe even what plans they had for the future, but did it really not matter to him who was his Queen Luna? Was I really just a body he saw unfit? Would anybody do? Roman tilted his head, his face set in such serious lines of someone deeply dissatisfied. Do you want the truth? He finally inquired, his voice quiet. It made my heart jolt nervously. Did I? I nodded without speaking, my eyes wide on his as I tried to prepare myself for further insults. I'm worried about you. If the title puts you in danger, I don't want you to have it. That's the truth. I hesitated. He was worried about me. And before he said he was trying to protect me. For some reason, it made me happy to hear it. Even though we pretty much had been fighting each other since day one, it made me glad to know I was able to do even this much to chip away at that steel heart of his. Why did it make me happy? With Diana's pregnancy, I could relinquish the title, couldn't I? I could use the last of the blessings as reason enough to no longer continue the path the goddesses placed before me. After all, why keep going? The wolves would probably see no point in harming humanity. Everything could go back to how it was. I could give it up now, knowing Diana's situation would be revealed far before the hunter's moon. I looked at Roman carefully. He was frighteningly beautiful. I felt out of my element. I could ask them for you, I said slowly before even realizing I was speaking. I felt stupid the moment I said the words and I didn't elaborate further in hopes that Roman wouldn't catch it. Of course, he did. Ask who what? I blanched. I tried to think of a cover-up, something that would sound natural, but my mind was blank. Instead, I tensed in preparation of further fury and told the truth of what had crossed my mind. I could ask the triple goddesses to make you mortal. I finally forced the words from my lips with great difficulty. When I didn't feel a responding anger and Roman didn't answer immediately, I felt awkward. I wouldn't even know where to begin with trying to ask any goddesses anything, but I wasn't lying. The goddesses seemed focused on stopping Roman, on taking and giving their blessings based on if the wolves were in their good graces, but nothing seemed to indicate they would release Roman in the end even if he were to change his mind. If it was a matter of just praying, Diana was secretly going to teach me the ways in that aspect. I wasn't sure how well Roman would take me offering to do a criminal act for him despite it being outlawed by him. Roman's beast seemed to stretch out within him even before he said anything. It was speaking to that otherworldly creature within me, making my skin heat up wordlessly. Even if Roman acted like I was the biggest headache in the world, his beast never held animosity towards me. I didn't feel threatened by the odd sensation. I've asked them for that for centuries. What makes you think they'd listen to you? His voice was low, a struggle underneath them that I couldn't understand. You said it yourself. They favor me. If they refuse, I could offer them something in return. A blessing for a blessing, maybe. I could ask them to take away my ability to control animals in return for releasing you from that curse. I was rambling at this point, embarrassed at how childish I sounded. Like I could just ask the sky for a trade and it would work flawlessly. You would give up your blessing for something like that? Roman was stunned. I hadn't expected him to be. Before I could answer him, he took a large step closer to me, closing the distance between us abruptly. Do not even think of doing that. You wouldn't last a day, as you are if you lost that power. His tone was sharp and demanding once more, but his words were yet another echo of what he'd been forced to say before. He was worried. He wanted to protect me. Even if it means giving up mortality. I asked in disbelief. Roman was silent a moment, too close for comfort. I felt like I was suffocating, but for some reason I didn't mind it. My skin felt sensitive, waiting for his touch after him standing so close to me, but he hadn't lifted his hands to even grab my shoulders, as he'd done in frustration before. I would never pick myself over my mate, Roman finally said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I was caught off guard and in my discomfort, I resorted to a bit of sarcasm to protect myself. But you'd pick another woman over me, I answered quickly, sharply. If it means keeping you off of our brother pack's hit list, then yes. I would pick anyone else, Roman replied, still not budging on his idea of protecting me. Forget it, I said stubbornly, hit list or not, I'm the Queen Luna. You'll just have to make sure to protect me. Jump in front of me if I'm being attacked. Take all the injuries. Be my shield. All that stuff that come with the perks of being an immortal mate. I was half-heartedly joking, but the way Roman watched me only made me more nervous as I spoke. Then you've decided, he said simply, without elaborating. My heart jolted in my chest at the simple statement. I felt more comfortable when facing potential death-fighting deity beings than standing before Roman like this. I had decided. It wasn't my duty to make any decision. I didn't decide based on what the pack needed, or even what humanity needed. It wasn't to win blessings from the goddesses that played with our lives. It was an accumulation of understanding, of unexplainable feelings beyond anger and fear that had been stirring ever since the moment I had first taken in his scent in our first actual battle. I nodded once, afraid to speak. I had hoped you would change your mind, but I also hoped you wouldn't, Roman admitted, his voice lowering with wolfish intentions. I was a statue in front of him, staring openly for any hints as to what doom awaited me. And yet, my blood within me sang of a type of excitement and adrenaline different than that which came with fighting for my life. I have my demands. Demands? I asked absently, my mind racing. You'll live with me from now on. I'll groom you into the position of Queen Luna. I don't want you known any further than you already are to the other packs until you've shifted completely. Roman listed the demand easily, as though he'd already considered this as an option long ago. He lowered his voice further before continuing. I want you to stay close to me. So you can be my shield. I'll count to 100. Roman ignored my question. The abrupt declaration startled me. His eyes were watching me with fresh hunger, his usual stoic features were lit up with it. What? I asked, my mind going blank. I'll give you a head start, as is custom. Run as fast as you can, he said firmly. A deep blush flourished over my skin. I was not prepared. My heart was pounding in my chest and my breath was heavy. Roman's eyes raked over my form, a look of satisfaction crossing his features before he closed his eyes reluctantly. 1, 2, 3. He counted slowly, deliberately. It was as though he knew it didn't matter how far I was able to run, he had no doubts he would catch me. He continued counting and I stood frozen before him. I took a couple quick steps back, intending to run as he had suggested, but I paused. I didn't want to run. I'd thrown myself into death matches without running and I wouldn't run now, even if there was some sort of tradition. I wasn't prey and I wasn't a wolf. I peered at him, as he stood so tense and ready to follow through on such an animalistic ceremony. It felt more comfortable with his eyes closed to look at him fully. He seemed less intimidating. I lifted a trembling hand to the fabric of my shirt, lifting it from my form and dropping it to the ground below me. I'd been dressed to go to sleep, so it left me bare from the waist up. This was the extent of my bravery. I lifted my arms to cover myself, feeling entirely breathless with uncertain anxiety. 68. 69. You're supposed to be running, Milena, Roman called my name teasingly. With enormous courage, I forced myself to take those steps closer to him that I'd previously taken away. Have you changed your? Roman opened his eyes, the blue of his irises glowing in the night, as he took in my presence. I felt exposed and uncertain as to what to do, but under his stare I felt something else entirely. I felt admired and beautiful, all in one look. My skin heated under the intensity of his gaze. You won't run? He asked, his voice husky with desire. I don't want to fight you anymore, my words trembled truthfully. Roman lifted his hand abruptly, making me jump despite all efforts, but he only clasped my wild onyx hair between his fingers carefully. I tightened my grip around my chest, as though I would be forced to expose myself any moment to him, but he didn't even look away from my face. He released his grip on my hair, grasping at his own shirt before pulling it off as well. I looked from his face to that scar-riddled chest of his, spotting the fresh scar he'd placed above his heart when stabbing himself with my own dagger. I absently lifted a hand, touching the scar carefully and remembering his anguish. Roman grabbed my wrist and caught my full attention. He paused and I could feel the desire of his beast boiling within him throughout me. I wondered what he felt from me. Still, he didn't ravage me as I felt his beast wanted. After a moment of gaining control, he stepped impossibly closer to me and lowered his face over mine. I lifted my chin on instinct, my eyes fluttering shut, and lost my breath as his lips claimed mine. The mark pulsed on my shoulder, and it made my entire body feel like it was on fire. I forgot everything. I lifted my hands up and around his neck while his arms moved around my waist to pull me close to him. His rough hands trailed along my bared back, the feeling so foreign yet entirely too enjoyable. Roman released me from his kiss and immediately lowered his lips over my shoulder, where he had bitten me so angrily long ago. I gasped in surprise, the touch of his lips on the mark enough to send a shock of pleasure throughout me. He growled appreciatively against me, and chills trailed over my body in response. "Lay down," he demanded roughly, his voice thick with desire. I took a shuddering breath, my mind reeling under all these new feelings, but his demand made me nervous all over again. When Roman released me, I tried not to immediately cover myself and run away despite my previous stance on the entire thing. I took another steadying breath and lowered myself on the ground nervously as he'd requested. Even though I tried not to, the moment I was on my back, I covered my chest again with my arms. Roman was immediately hovering above my form, lowering himself to the ground just to the side of me in a way that felt much less intimidating than the times I'd fought him and ended up in a much more intimate position. I watched him openly, trying to deduce what he would do next before he did it as though I could prepare myself. "I won't hurt you," Roman said to me, tilting his head as he looked at me. "I know," I whispered softly, my voice nearly lost under the pounding of my heart. "Will you kiss me again?" I couldn't believe I even asked, but Roman didn't tease me for it. He immediately lowered his lips over mine, sending me reeling all over again. Roman's hand started caressing my waist first, trailing over my stomach, and then up under my protective arms, between my breasts, and over my throat possessively. I immediately grasped his wrist in response, forgetting about covering myself. His hand then trailed over my collarbone and grasped my exposed breast, caressing me fondly. I gasped against his lips, my face hot from such an invasion, but I didn't fight him off. His lips moved from mine to my throat, lowering over my chest until he was running his tongue over my breast eagerly. I had lost my grip on his wrist and instead grasped at the dirt under me, panting at the pleasure pulsing throughout me as he devoured me. Roman only removed his mouth from my chest to begin pulling the fabric of my shorts down from my waist over my legs. My heart was in my throat and my skin felt heated all over as I let him bear me completely. I kept my knees tightly pressed together, only allowing an inch of space when he undressed me before closing them again. I felt entirely shy. I didn't know what it would be like my first time with a man. But I definitely hadn't expected it to be a deity shapeshifter under the stars among the trees. I trembled underneath his hungry stare, afraid but not wanting him to stop. Roman moved forward to place his lips over one knee and then the next, coaxingly. His hands gripped my thighs lightly, not forcing anything. I held my breath, but then parted my legs slowly and just barely. It was enough. Roman slipped between them easily. I gasped, feeling the fabric of his pant press against me, as he settled above me comfortably. His lips were suddenly over mine again, his hand running over my body as I panted below him. And then his hand moved between my legs, between us, and brushed deliberately over my most sensitive area. I tensed in surprise, grasping his shoulder and arm on either side as though he could steady me. But as his lips continued to devour mine, and his hand caressed me at my core, I found myself melting in his grip. He was intrusive, exploring me and suddenly moving in a way that sparked enough pleasure to make me throw my head back in response. Roman used the opportunity to run his lips over the mark again, nibbling at the curve of my neck demandingly until I was shaking with desire. I didn't even notice when he'd moved above me, moving his hand from between my leg to grip my thigh firmly. I cried out. Roman was pushing into me, far more carefully than he wanted to. I could feel his own desires clawing at me from within, and I could feel him fighting his urges. I dug my fingers into his flesh, panting heavily as he continued to push deep into me. He waited a moment, breathing heavily as well against my shoulder. I didn't need to hear him say it. He felt amazing. Even the sudden sharp pain didn't take away the pleasure of him inside me. I lifted my head, spotting the mark I'd given him on his shoulder as well, and placed a fluttering kiss on the mark. I felt the shock of intense pleasure thrill through him and gasped in surprise. "You're tempting my wolf," Roman warned me, his voice thick with his beast. I didn't hesitate. I lifted my lips again and bit lightly on the mark, running my tongue over it and almost purring at the responding pleasure I could feel within him. Roman growled, tightening his grip on me, and he began to rock into me with a struggled restraint. I released my kiss on his shoulder, falling back to the ground as I felt him thrusting into me, taking me as gently as he could at first. But as I clung to him, grasping at him and asking for more, he began to lose the control he struggled to keep. I whimpered as he grew rougher, his hands grasping at me hungrily and his hips thrusting against mine more wildly. I felt something pooling low in my stomach, a feeling of heat and pleasure beginning to quicken my breath mindlessly. Roman made a noise of such beastly longing, grasping my nape of my neck to pull my lips to his hungrily. I gasped against him, tensing as a rush of pleasure exploded throughout both of us, blinding me further with passion until it faded slowly. We remained panting for air in each other's grasp, Roman's face just above mine. I lifted my hand to touch his face, my thumb running over his cheekbone affectionately. I felt, for the moment, that I had known him for hundreds of years. And in that moment, my heart was so full I felt it might burst. Roman kissed me deeply again. Chapter 20. I was looking at a map. Only, it wasn't a map like any I'd seen before. In my studies, I had only ever learned about one place, and that was my village. The map for my village had been small. It did nothing more than identify buildings and areas immediately around the village. The rest of the map had been blotted out with images of trees, and that had been the extent of our education in the matter. This map was large enough to spread across a large table within a room I'd never been in before, which was within a building I'd never been in before either. The King's Corner, Roman had told me with a hint of amusement, as though the name held a secret inside joke I wouldn't understand. Apparently, it was where Roman spent much of his time when he wasn't resting at home or patrolling the Pax village. It also was where I would most likely end up spending much of my time once I'd learned what it was to be Queen Luna. "What is this?" I asked aloud, looking at the detailed drawings of trees, mountains I'd never seen, rivers spiraling through the land, and several symbols, words, and other information that didn't translate for me. Roman was resting a weight on the end of the map he had unrolled for me. "You don't recognize the world in which you live in?" He answered with a question curiously. There was something guarded in his words, as he'd asked, that told me he'd thought of something he didn't want me to know. Still, I was very much distracted by the picture of this world before me and also by his own question. I glanced from the map to him with interest. "This is our world?" I inquired curiously, looking determinedly. "Where are we?" Roman stepped closer to me, leaning forward to rest his fingertip on the symbol of the triple goddesses. It was obvious enough that I felt a bit silly for not noticing, but my embarrassment was overwhelmed by my curiosity as I looked at the land around the Trinity Pax village. Roman lifted his finger from the spot and gestured to the entire map. "This is Moirai. It's where lichens and humans have coexisted since before even my time," he explained to me patiently. He pointed again to the Trinity Pack before then pointing to another symbol not far off. Each pack has its own village named after their pack. They have their own identifying symbol, and their own hierarchy of alphas and lunas which all report to me. And soon you. The symbols of the packs were etched in colors of gold, silver, and red. I noticed in between there were other symbols more like letters than drawings, smaller and colored in solid black. I looked back to where Trinity was on the map, my eyes slowly following the surface under the village south, down until a small line of water had been drawn. I followed it east until it met with a larger, curved river. I stared at the river blankly, hesitant. Which way did it flow, I wondered. I followed it north, but it only passed by Trinity closely before traveling further into more pack land. My eyes darted back to where the creek met the river and I looked south. Not too far south, a letter A in black was drawn, though I didn't know what it meant. Did you find it, yet? Roman asked me, having been watching me quietly. I looked from the map to him, my mind swarming with uncertainty. What? Your human village, he said simply. I paused, but then turned back to the map and lifted my finger to rest on that small, insignificant letter just to the west of the river. Then I looked at him for confirmation. He nodded, not appearing to be concerned that I could find it. It's called Alpha. I felt a jolt of surprise. I'd lived my whole life in a nameless village, a citizen to a nameless town with an unimpressive map of our world, while the wolves lived in a vast land of plentiful resources and connections. It felt unfair. I knew this would make you unhappy, Roman sighed, frowning. His words drew me out of my own head. I looked at him quickly. I just never knew it had a name, I told him honestly. Why Alpha? Before I became King Alpha, things were different. Humans vastly outnumbered lichens. The largest pack, the first pack, was named Trinity after the triple goddess. Your human village came from the largest human city, named Hominidi back then. We were all children of the goddesses, lichen and human together. We were at peace, Roman explained, capturing my attention entirely. When they attacked the packs, I became the King Alpha and led the war against them. We were outnumbered, but they were overpowered. After they surrendered, I relocated wolves and humans alike in masses. Roman pointed to the symbols once more, but immediately indicated to the small letter of what I was beginning to realize were other human villages. Not far from every single pack was a human village, to the point that it was obvious it couldn't be a coincidence. I broke apart every human city, separated them into smaller populations. I broke apart packs, assigned new alphas and lunas to each of them, and posted them nearby. I implemented rules that would control the humans' knowledge, resources, and population so that they could never harm us as they did before. And then I named those human villages by letter Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta. Roman pointed to each of the villages in order, as he said their names. I was staring at him openly now. He stated what he'd done as a passing fact, without any remorse. That's horrible, I said quietly, frowning. They intended to wipe us from existence back then, Milena. I could have done the same to them. It was a war, he merely responded firmly, a heat of that familiar hatred rising within him at the memory. He subdued it rather quickly with a sigh. I'm only going over this because as Queen Luna, you need to become familiar with the land, every single pack, and their leaders. I will give you a list so you can learn on your own, but in the future you will be meeting them as well. After you've shifted. I hadn't truly realized that agreeing to being groomed to be Queen Luna would mean learning an entirely new world, but I hadn't expected it to be easy work either. Roman began to roll the map back up, placing it where he'd gotten it from behind the desk at the end of the room. When he returned, he stood before me with his arms crossed. I felt suddenly nervous with his eyes on me, but I withstood the inspection without blushing. How much do you know about the hierarchy within the pack? Roman asked me, lost in his own thoughts as he no doubt considered what all I would need to learn. I know of the Alpha, Luna, and Beta. I've heard other words. Rogues. I was told about tutelary titles. Maida and Maidan for the crone's wolves, which are oracles. Gaho and Hago for the mother's wolves. And Alta and Tala for the maiden's wolves. I listed my knowledge while counting them off on my fingers, thankful that I had learned even this much during my time here. There are also warrior wolves. But I don't know where they fit in the hierarchy. That's a start. Here, Roman pulled a chair from the table and indicated for me to sit. I did as he asked, and he stepped away a moment before returning with a piece of paper and pen. He sat next to me, placing the paper between us. He was really close and it was pretty distracting, but I made myself focus. Every pack has its own hierarchy, but it's the same titles for all packs. At the top, there is the Alpha and Luna. The Alpha is the male leader of the pack. The Luna is the female leader of the pack. A pack can have either an Alpha by itself or a Luna by itself, but their mate will usually be named as the corresponding Alpha or Luna in turn. These titles must be held up through challenges, as a leader has to have the power to lead. Roman wrote the names on either side of the paper, so that they were even but separated. He drew 2 lines directly down under both titles. The beta is chosen by his or her alpha. The title itself cannot be challenged, but the wolf can be. If the beta is ever killed, another must be selected. The beta is considered the alpha's right hand. They are considered the alpha's guardian, enforcer, and will act as alpha in the alpha's absence. The beta is under both the alpha and Luna, though their primary duties are to the alpha. Roman wrote beta under the line that was connected to alpha, and then turned to the line connected to Luna. The soul is the Luna's equivalent of the alpha's beta. This person is the Luna's guardian, enforcer, and acting Luna when the Luna is absent. Just like a beta, this wolf is chosen, so the title can't be earned through challenge, Roman explained before drawing AV under the beta, and soul titles so that they combined underneath. The rest of most of the wolves in a pack are considered deltas. These include medics, warriors, surveyors, workers, and it used to include oracles. Roman wrote delta largely, and underneath this he listed each type, including the oracles, which he crossed out purposely. He listed random descriptions under each one: healers for medics, soldiers and enforcers under warriors, messengers and spies under surveyors, and several duties under workers such as hunters, farmers, cleaners, cooks, builders, and a mark to indicated several more duties available. Then he drew yet another line leading to another class below, even a delta. The lowest rank allowed in a pack is that of omegas, Roman continued wisely, drawing a symbol next to the word and indicating to it, "You'll know them by this brand on their neck." These are wolves who have committed a crime against the packs worthy enough to earn a life of servitude, imprisonment, and shame. Some may be challengers who failed to win, but survived the battle. Roman paused as he mentioned this and he glanced at me. "You're lucky I didn't brand you," he said with a small smirk. "I would have loved to see you try," I responded fiercely. Roman's smile grew and it held me mesmerized for a moment. I wasn't used to his patience, the gentleness of his words, or the smile that didn't hold malice behind it. He turned to add another word, not connected to the branch of the pack. "Rogues are wolves without packs. Most are banished wolves or have chosen to leave their pack, some may be omegas prior, and even those who are born rogues were probably born of someone who had been banished, branded, or abandoned their pack. They can be problematic, but many times they are taken in by packs if they wish for it," Roman said, his words reminding me of Diana and Kate, who had been with a pack of rogues before joining the Trinity pack. I could imagine Kate being mysterious and devious enough to be kicked from a pack, but I couldn't imagine someone like Diana doing anything to warrant being banished. Did she leave her previous pack? I was extremely curious, and now that Roman was more open to giving me answers, I felt I could ask. "Diana and Kate were rogues before, right?" "Yes. Diana was born rogue. She claimed responsibility for Kate, because no one knew the circumstances of her past. That and Kate's talent for fighting were the reasons why I agreed to accept her with Diana." "Is it because she wouldn't tell you her past?" I asked him curiously. "Kate is mute," Roman stated simply before pausing. "You should have noticed. Something strange was definitely up with Kate. Yet the last time I had mentioned it to her, she had said it was just gossip. Or had she even answered? Should I just tell Roman that she could speak? Was she hiding her voice for a reason? A part of me wanted to just tell the truth, but another felt an attachment to Kate and wanted to protect her. What if I caused her trouble by telling one of her secrets? Maybe she just didn't like anyone. Right? I responded shortly, closing my mouth firmly. I want you from now on to stop every pack member you come across. I want you to learn each of their names, if they have a tutelary title, what their duty is as a delta wolf or otherwise, and who they are connected to either by mate or by relative. I don't expect you to learn about all the wolves in all the packs, but as Luna of this pack, you should know who you're meant to lead, Roman instructed me determinedly, adding to my work steadily. Okay, I agreed confidently. I had time. I could do this. I had already learned many of the names of the people of this pack in the months he'd been gone, so it wouldn't be too difficult to learn more about them. Follow me, Roman stood suddenly, holding out his hand for me. I lifted my own, grasping his hand and standing to do as he requested. He began to lead me out of the king's corner, out into the village determinedly. It was a cloudy and humid day, the weather warm enough to dampen my skin immediately. It would become hotter soon, but I'd always enjoyed the summer air. I did as Roman suggested, as we went on our journey through the village. I stopped every wolf we came by, greeting the ones I knew and being introduced to any I didn't. I asked more questions beyond their names and added the information into the depths of my mind, like putting them into boxes that I would be able to access later. In between this, Roman held my hand and led me without second thought. His hand was rough in mine. It reminded me of the night before, in the forest, when those hands had been exploring every part of my body. I blushed at the thought and immediately tried to think of something else in hopes that Roman wouldn't notice any change in my behavior. I was living with him officially now. Would it be like how it was before I'd completed the mark? Or would we fall into that passion again in the future? A part of me, the part of me that enjoyed the thrill of it, hoped it wasn't just a one-time ceremony. Another part of me tried to remind myself that he was responsible for the misery of my entire family, including my ancestors, so I shouldn't have any feelings beyond hate for him. Roman ended up leading me to the arena, where the warrior wolves were training with Beta Caleb. He released his grip on my hand when we arrived. I felt an immediate anxiety rise within me upon seeing Caleb. Did he know his mate was pregnant yet? He would be the first Lycan father in nearly 2 decades, based on what Logan had told me before. I suspected he would be absolutely ecstatic to learn this, but I didn't want to be the one to spill Diana's secrets. That was me, the keeper of secrets. Beta Caleb, line them up, Roman greeted Caleb, sliding back into his shell as King Alpha. Caleb glanced at me just briefly, nodding respectfully, and then immediately shouted for everyone to line up as Roman had ordered. From what I could tell, all the warrior wolves were here, including Logan and Kate. I had to fight the urge to greet them all as old friends, recalling my many weeks of visiting this very place to practice fighting. Would I get to do this again? Once everyone was standing stiffly in a line, Roman looked at each one before turning to me. He stepped towards me, ignoring everyone else for the moment. These are our strongest wolves in the pack. Not only will they be able to protect you, but they will be able to survive challenges. This is important when picking out a soul, Roman explained to me carefully. Picking a soul. I knew he had just explained to me the hierarchy of the packs, but I hadn't expected to have to pick my version of a beta so suddenly. I won't be able to be with you every moment of every day. Normally, I would give you more time to decide, but pre-shift leaves you vulnerable as you are. So I need you to pick now. Be wise. You need to pick someone you feel you can trust. Someone who you feel would be suitable to play your role when you are unable to, Roman continued, turning me to face the line of warrior wolves. Select your soul. I stepped from his grasp to approach the line of wolves hesitantly. It felt intensely odd. As I looked at them, I had an image of a line of human girls waiting to be selected for the wolf moon. But these weren't scared girls. These were dangerous wolves, all of which looked at me as though any one of them would be okay with being selected. If it was someone I had to trust. I immediately looked at Kate. She was leaning against her lance, the stiffness that the others retained out of respect missing in her own form. She was obviously pleased about something. She would be a good guardian, as the shadow of death, and I did trust her. I didn't like the idea of putting her in danger by keeping her at my side, but I knew she was tough. Could she act as Luna when I couldn't? Kate is mute. She didn't communicate to the rest of the pack. Wouldn't that end up a problem if she were my soul? I hesitated. My eyes slid from her form to Logan's slowly. I missed training with him, and I felt a sense of gratitude for what he had taught me. I wouldn't have survived the fight against Lillian without his training. I wouldn't have survived hunting with the lichens if he hadn't stopped Vio's attack. He'd proven he could protect me. Did I trust him? He had been the one who would have killed me during the wolf moon, but then if I based anything off of that, my options would be severely limited. Would he be able to act out my role as Luna when I wasn't able to? I couldn't see why not. Logan, I announced determinedly. I stepped in front of him, lifting my hand as though I were going to lead him into a new world. Won't you be my soul? Logan's light brown eyes peered at my hand, his face remaining emotionless as he did so. He didn't reach to take it. He only lifted his eyes to my face before lowering himself to the ground, onto a knee. If you feel I am worthy, I will accept, Logan said respectfully. You're worthy, I answered, lowering my hand hesitantly. I glanced at Roman, but he didn't offer me any ideas on what to do next. Queen Luna, I will guard you with my life. I will walk with you at your side as long as I am able to. I will be your weapon and your voice. I will remain loyal to you, your mate, and your pack for as long as I live as your soul, Logan declared formally. He abruptly lifted his head to look at me, offering his hand with a smirk of something like sarcasm, as though he were teasing me for my previous action. Will you accept my vow? I will, Soul Logan, I responded, humid as I placed my hand in his. When he stood, I had a sudden urge to attack him like I'd done many times before, just as an impulse. I must have tensed because he immediately did as well. You're out of practice. I'd win. He stated, guessing my thoughts easily. We'll see, I muttered, removing my hand from his grasp, but I didn't try to attack him. I would have plenty of chances to do so in the future. I hope he looked forward to a life of surprise battles. Continue as you are, Soul Logan. Luna Milena will come for you tomorrow, Roman ordered before indicating for me to follow him once again. The learning never stopped, it seemed. But as I looked at him, I absently smiled, a fluttering feeling of warmth flooding within me at knowing he wasn't planning on leaving me somewhere for someone else to deal with. I could feel Kate's devious eyes watching me, no doubt filled with glee at this turn of events. Even despite his stern presence, I easily stepped towards him and linked my arm under his to grasp his hand, as he had allowed before. He softened almost immediately, tilting his head to look at me in a way that made me nervous and self-conscious. What's next? I asked curiously, my heart beginning to quicken at his stare. Roman cleared his throat, tightening his grip on my hand as though he had gotten lost for a moment. Patrols. This was all I got from him before he turned and led me from the arena, continuing to introduce me further to any wolves we came across, while also explaining to me in more depth what duties were assigned in each area within the village. I knew Roman was speaking professionally, explaining these things to me like a teacher would, but I felt myself drawn by his voice. Nothing he said seemed boring and every word seared into my brain like its own brand. The entire time he spoke, I felt compelled to be close to him. So I was happy when he continued to hold me in his grasp, as though he felt the same. I tried not to think about it any deeper than that and decided to allow myself to just be with him as we were. I have time, I told myself. Chapter 21. What kind of things did you like to do? Do you like to do? Besides being an alpha. My words were light and curious as I looked into Roman's face. I was resting on his lap much more comfortably than I thought I'd ever be with him. My hands were lying against his chest, but his was tracing my face with his own curiosity. I felt backwards, upside down, but oddly content in being so. I don't do anything I like, Roman responded simply. I frowned. You're immortal and you've lived for centuries, but you don't have anything you do just because you like to. I asked skeptically. I couldn't imagine having his power, status, and not just doing whatever I wanted to do. But then, Roman seemed like someone who would punish himself even more so than he was already being punished. It had already been weeks since I'd first mated with Roman officially. I'd spent most of my days learning everything about the Trinity Pack, its origins, its members, and its territory included. I'd been learning about other packs and their leaders. I'd also been training, both with my soul, Logan, and with Roman himself. Where Logan seemed more intent on honing my defensive and offensive fighting skills, Roman had been helping me learn more about shifting. I was stubborn to this day. I could hold a partial shift longer than before, but the full shift still evaded me. While I might spend some days without Roman, I spent every night with him being devoured by a wild passion that I was certain I'd grow tired of but never did. What did I think of the King Alpha now? He was terribly handsome, and his touch brought heat to my skin. He was untamed, monstrous even, but his voice was like cool water, refreshing and relieving. I looked for him when he wasn't around and I looked only at him when he was. What did I think of him? I like to train with you, Roman answered my question, running his thumb over my bottom lip slowly. That's work, I frowned seriously. I like to play with you then, he continued, unfazed. I smiled, despite trying not to. I meant before me. There was nothing before you, Roman shrugged simply. There were centuries before me. You're such a sad excuse for a wolf, Roman, I sighed, leaning forward to rest my forehead against his. Roman only chuckled at my insult, running his hands over my back delicately. I inhaled deeply, breathing in that indescribable scent of his that made the beast inside me shiver in delight. You smell. I paused to keep myself from saying something embarrassing. Amazing. Wonderful. The best excuse for a wolf you've ever met. Roman teased me, leaning forward to steal a kiss. I pulled away sharply, holding my hand over his mouth before looking at him determinedly. Like a dog, I lied. I squeaked in surprise when he twisted, flipping me onto my back below him on the bed. But when he hovered above me, I didn't try to struggle or find an escape. I'd long stopped trying to escape him by now. Roman lowered his face over mine delicately, trailing his lips over my right cheek, just below my eye, and I closed my eyes in response. My heart was racing in my chest and my skin was hot with enjoyment. You smell like the trees, Roman said slowly, trailing his lips over my jawline carefully. You smell like the earth and the rivers, the day and the night. He lowered his lips over my collarbone, where Lillian's claws had left a nasty scar, and my eyes fluttered open in response. You smell like prey and predator. Human and wolf. He lifted his face back over mine, watching me hungrily. Tempting and dangerous. I pulled him to me, lifting my chin to capture his lips with mine. Before he lost himself completely, Roman pulled away, laughing when I reached to kiss him further before pushing me down firmly. I have something for you, he explained when I frowned at him. Roman pushed himself up, and stood to grab something from a drawer nearby. I sat up, pulling my knees to my chest and peering at him curiously. What is it? I asked, trying to peek around his form, but he kept it hidden. Then he turned and sat close to me once more. I expected a typical gift a man would give a woman, maybe jewelry or flowers. Instead, He held out a sheathed weapon, the hilt of strong metal with intricate designs of wolves among it. I was enthralled. I reached out for it with great interest and he quickly pulled it from my reach, a determination in his features. I pulled my hand back to my chest and looked at him like a lost puppy. "Is it not mine?" I asked. "It's silver," he responded, his voice suddenly intensely serious. He lifted it so that I could see it again, pulling the blade extremely carefully from the sheath until I could see the metal, a sharp and brilliant silver blade. "It's lethal to wolves. A wound by silver is like a wound to a human. We don't heal from it like wolves. You will have to be careful not to harm yourself with it." Roman suddenly ran the flat part of the blade across his forearm, not even wincing when the metal hissed angrily against his flesh in response, as it burned him. I could feel the heat of the wound in my own arm, furious and sharp like fire. The beast inside me seemed to explode with it, desperate to end the source of the pain. "Stop!" I cried out, reaching to stop him, but he held me back from touching the metal myself. He healed almost instantly, the pain nothing but a memory of an ache on my own skin. Not even silver affected him like it did other lichens. "Sorry, Milena," he said sweetly, placing the blade back into the sheath carefully. "I forgot that would hurt you as well." Then he lifted the weapon for me to take. I did so quickly, if only to prevent him from trying it on himself further. Once it was in my grip, I looked at it curiously. "I want you to keep it with you and don't be afraid to protect yourself with it against any wolf that tries to harm you, understand?" Roman was watching me with a frown until I finally turned to smile at him. "I understand," I answered. He trusted me with a secret weapon not allowed to any other wolf or human, if only to help protect me. It warmed me just knowing that. It also frightened me to know I held such a dangerous weapon in my grasp, and I hoped I'd never have to use it. The water was cool over my legs and up to my waist. My bare feet flexed over the soft dirt underneath me. Diana stood in front of me, her hands held with mine pressed against them before us. We stood in the dark of the night under the waning moon, just her and I. It wasn't cold, despite the water. The air was warm from the previous summer day. I was in a tight sleeveless shirt. Before we got here, Diana was in something more loosely fit, though as she stood before me she had taken off her baggier shirt to reveal the tank top underneath. She was beginning to show, only slightly, a tiny bump over her stomach that could be mistaken for a food baby. No one had seemed to notice that she was sticking to a baggier wardrobe to hide it. She had been training herself to match her heartbeat with the child's with a determination only a woman desperate to protect her unborn could do. Even now, before me, I couldn't hear the child's heartbeat beyond hers. It was impressive, really. I had no idea what type of things she'd done to prevent Beta Caleb from finding out, but I could tell already there was a strain between them and Caleb didn't know why. I wanted to tell him, but I knew it was up to Diana to do so. She was afraid he would tell his alpha. And even though she wouldn't speak it, she was afraid what Roman would do. After all, there was still not a single other wolf with child in this or any other pack. I hadn't participated in any prayers for fertility yet, so that may have been my fault. With the new tasks Roman had given me, along with the training I did with Logan, plus spending my nights in Roman's bed, it was hard to find a moment to get away. On this night, I'd only gotten away long after Roman had fallen asleep, and even this was stressful enough. I had expected him to catch me at any moment. "We must be respectful to the cycle of the moon," Diana said to me finally, her voice quiet as she glanced to the sky. "And in our respect, we must still be grateful to the Trinity. So when we want to pray to the Maiden, we do so during the waxing moon. When we wish blessings from our Mother, we do so during full or new moons. Tonight, any prayers we give will be in honor of the crone, our goddess of the waning moon." "Is that why we are in the water?" I asked her curiously. "You know of the crone's eye?" She responded, twisting her fingers through mine before looking over our hands to me. "I've been told," I answered truthfully. "The water acts as a bridge between our world and the goddesses. It's where oracles go to seek answers from the crone. And tonight is in the honor of the crone, under her moon, so yes, this is why we are in the water," Diana confirmed easily, flattening her hand over mine again. "How much do you know about Hecate?" "She's the one who brings death," I said, my voice hushed as though it would summon tragedy just speaking it. Diana chuckled at my ominous statement. "Without an end, there would be no cycle. The flower would grow, absorbing the fruits of the ground for eternity, until the ground had nothing left to give. What might have grown in its place will never be born. And the flower would be alone in the end, without peace," Diana said to me wisely, closing her eyes, as she took in the breeze lightly drifting over us. "The crone is the most frightening goddess to those who are already alive, but to the dead, she is warmth. It is her face that will be our last comfort before she guides us on our last and longest journey. Do not fear her, Mila." I closed my eyes as well, imagining what type of otherworldly creature would exist to guide the souls of the dead into the afterlife. Would it be a morbid goddess? Or maybe an angry one, who's seen nothing but the anguish of those who wanted more time? I couldn't imagine a kind, warm type that Diana apparently thought of. Even the name spoke of something old and decrepit, a crone. "Artemis, huntress of the moon, make my aim true," Diana began, her voice soft yet solid in the night, as she repeated the prayer from the night she'd asked for fertility. I followed her lead, repeating those words in an echo: "Aim true, aim true, aim true." As she spoke, the water seemed to still around us, and I could hear the beginning of that familiar call in the night, an energy raising around us that made my voice lower, to a whisper hesitantly. "Selene, white-armed mistress of the shining moon, the silver crescent crowns your ebon hair. Cloaked in darkness, you cross the night sky, O goddess. To you, Selene, I offer my greeting, my praise, and my thanks for your many gifts," Diana called out, the humming around us seeming to grow. I opened my eyes, looking to the side and around us as though I could pinpoint where it was coming from. The surface of the lake had turned into that eerie vision of the night sky, clear and vibrant yet smooth like the surface of a mirror. Even my movements did nothing to disturb this. When I looked to Diana, she was looking at me as well, a small smile on her features as though to comfort me. I was struck with the image of my own mother, comforting me after a bad dream in the night. "Is there nothing you wish to ask of the crone, Mila?" Diana asked me lightly, as if there was nothing frightening in reaching out to touch gods. But her question made me calm, as I thought about what kind of things I would ask the goddess. The call around me still hummed vibrantly, an energy pulsing as though waiting for my words. "Mighty Hecate," I began quietly, without Diana's assistance. I hesitated, but then cleared my throat and closed my eyes before starting again, with more determination. "Mighty Hecate, goddess of the oracles, you are both the dark and the light. You are the way and you are the light along it. My goddess, you hold the keys of all creation." Diana began to repeat the prayer, chanting it as I stood stiffly before her. Could the goddess hear me? Would she be listening, wondering why this pitiful mortal was calling to her now? Would she answer if I asked her to? "Please," I said, frowning at myself, "stop punishing him." Diana hesitated mid-chant, but then continued determinedly. "Stop punishing Roman stone," I repeated, "please, let him rejoin the cycle and find peace." After repeating my request several times, actually pleading with a goddess I wasn't sure would even hear me like some religious fanatic, I began to chant the prayer with Diana once more. I didn't receive any vision nor hear any response. In the end, the hum of energy faded into the night, as though it never came, and for all I knew, even if the goddess had heard me, she probably turned away stubbornly. What had Roman done to deserve mercy, after all? After leaving the lake, Diana put an arm around my shoulders, pulling me to her fondly. "I think she was listening," Diana told me, her mood light. Yeah, right. I probably annoyed her, I replied, my own mood darkening. Now that we were walking back towards the village, I felt a bit ridiculous talking to the sky in the middle of the night. Many wolves have prayed for the King Alpha to die, so I'm sure she's used to it, Diana answered, laughing at the look of sudden horror on my face. I stopped walking, clasping my hands together anxiously. I wasn't asking her to kill him. I suddenly burst before turning to storm my way back to the lake and let the cursed goddess know just that. I know, I'm just teasing, she quickly declared, pulling me back to her. The goddesses can hear our intent beyond our words, of course. You don't have to worry. I still felt nervous as she continued to lead me back, glancing behind me and thinking maybe I should go back just in case. Anyway, let's clean you up before sending you back to the King Alpha. He won't be happy at all if he hears you're participating in illegal rituals, Diana answered with a sigh, running a hand over her stomach thoughtfully. I glanced at her small bump curiously, wondering what the world would be like after her child was born. Was that what the goddesses were waiting for? Would the curse be fully broken after Diana's child was born? I'll come during the waxing moon next time, I told her, lost in my own thoughts. If you think it'll help. But maybe you shouldn't do any more rituals yourself. What if you're caught? I'll be careful, Queen Luna, Diana reassured me before looking at me long and hard. Thank you for keeping my secret. I'm sure it's been killing you. Honestly, seriously killing me, I groaned, running my hand through my hair in exhaustion. Diana laughed, which made me smile in turn, and we continued back towards her house before I would return to Roman, keeping yet another secret from him in the night. After I changed clothes at Diana's home, being quiet and sneaky per her direction, we both were saying our goodbyes when the lights suddenly came on within the front room. I yelped and hid behind Diana, knowing we had been caught in the middle of the night by Beta Caleb. What are you? Caleb began when he saw the two of us, Diana standing as though nothing were wrong and me hiding behind her, as though something definitely was, but then he shook his head. I don't even want to know. Is everything okay? Diana asked Caleb, ignoring the fact that we were obviously up to no good. I looked at Diana in surprise. She was good. It was no wonder she could hide her pregnancy from her own mate so far. She didn't look guilty at all. Alpha Roman just summoned me. Caleb responded somewhat stiffly, reminding me of the tension that still remained between the two of them. At Roman's name, I stood straighter, realizing there was no way he didn't know I wasn't where I was supposed to be now. I was doomed. Is it about the Queen Luna? Diana pressed, pulling me from behind her protectively. She was no doubt about to think of some brilliant excuse to save me. It is and isn't. There are visitors from the brother packs here. They want answers about the Red Moon Alpha's daughter, Caleb answered honestly. He turned his eyes on me with a frown. Stay here, Luna Mila. Either I or the King Alpha will come for you when it's safe. Okay, I said quickly, much too agreeable. I had been saved by the brother packs. Or maybe they had doomed me. Either way, I wasn't in immediate danger of having to explain to Roman why I'd been out in the middle of the night. As Caleb moved to head out, he reached out as though by habit towards Diana, who quickly stepped just out of reach. Caleb paused, tensing his outstretched hand into a fist, and turned away before leaving without another word. I looked after him and then back to Diana, feeling my own heart twist at the sight. I know, Diana said with her own pain in her voice to whatever thought must have crossed my face. He just needs to wait a little longer. With Roman and Caleb meeting with the brother pack visitors, I was left back to the familiar guest room within Diana's home. In the night, I thought I could hear her quiet cries which broke my own heart listening to, but I reassured myself they would be okay once Caleb knew why his mate was keeping her distance. I was restless. Were the packs demanding that Roman pick another Queen Luna right this moment? He wouldn't tell them of me until I was fully shifted, as he'd said so many times before, so what kind of answer would he be giving them in the meantime? I rolled over in my bed, uncomfortable. Maybe I could just go eavesdrop a little. I shouldn't. I had already done one thing to anger Roman tonight. I shouldn't add another. I hesitated, but then reached out for him tenderly across our mate bond. I couldn't feel him. He was blocking me again. I sat up sharply. This meant he wouldn't know I was nearby if I did eavesdrop. I laid back down. I really shouldn't. Honestly, how much could I get away with in one night? I rolled over with a sigh. I couldn't hear Diana anymore. She was probably deep in slumber by now. I could just go peek, just for a moment. I flung myself from the bed and began to make my escape. No one stopped me as I snuck out of the house, making my way towards the King's Corner. I had no doubt that's where they would be. I'd gone there plenty of times to learn how to sneak around, too. Besides this, I was Queen Luna, and the entire Trinity pack knew this. So I didn't have to sneak around if I didn't want to. I approached two of the Lycan guards, Ben, who was Deb's mate, and Thomas, who was without a mate so far. They nodded to me as I entered without a word, not making any move to stop me as I expected. Roman probably hadn't thought I would come. He would learn one day, I'm sure. I was a lot sneakier once inside the building. While I didn't mind pack members seeing me, I didn't want any non-members to announce my presence. I went the back way towards where a private entrance to Roman's office was. I carefully opened it to find no one within, but I could hear Roman's voice in the distance. In the room adjacent to this one was the large table room Roman took me often to teach me about the world we lived in. The wolves were in there, speaking with vigor and full of dark emotions. I carefully approached the door, as quietly as possible, listening intently as I did so. I don't believe you, a man declared sharply. Why wouldn't you send word of what happened if it was that simple? Lillian lost the challenge. And the challenger died as well. It's a ridiculous claim. It's a true claim, Beta Caleb stated angrily. There is no Queen Luna of this pack. How many times does your king have to tell you this? Then pick another. I won't, Roman said darkly. It was a foolish thing to do in the first place and a waste of time. There were shuffles of discomfort and anger at his declaration. So you expect us to believe you'll continue to reject this abomination of a mate, with no Queen Luna between you, and proceed as planned? I leaned against the door further with intrigue, and it opened just a tiny crack silently. I paused, not hearing what was said next, but when no one seemed to notice I used the crack to peer within the room curiously. There were 6 men within the room. Roman and Caleb were standing with their backs to me. The angriest of the visitors was standing across the table from them with his arms crossed. He looked older, more so than my own father, but still strikingly handsome. Beside him was another man, equally as intimidating. And on the other end of the table were 2 more, who seemed more focused on the table itself. This mate is a last effort of the goddesses to change the fate of the humans. It won't work, Roman stated dangerously, leaning forward to rest his palms on the table. We will proceed. When the time comes, I will send out the message. Alpha, Beta, and Gamma are our biggest concerns, Beta Caleb chimed in, pointing at the table determinedly. I slid my gaze from their forms to the table itself and realized it was the same map that Roman had shown me before. There were figurines on top of the map this time, indicating packs and human villages. Caleb moved 6 of the pack figurines together, pointing to the 3 human villages he had mentioned. The 6 packs were surrounded by the villages. Or rather, was this on purpose? A meeting point, where they could fan out easily in one swoop. We will attack together, ending the highest density of humans here, while the rest of the packs will wipe out the ones they are stationed by simultaneously. From there, We'll comb the lands for any who might have escaped. This might take months to years until the purge is complete, but on this night, the first night, it will be over." Roman spoke the words coldly without a hint of remorse or mercy. It was convincing. It was truthful. I watched as he knocked over the figurine for Gamma, Beta, and then hesitated over Alpha before promptly knocking it down as well. This is what I intended from the beginning. "I won't stop now," he promised the wolves before him, standing stiffly. He turned his head just slightly to the side, as though listening towards my direction, and I froze. Then I promptly turned and bolted from the room before I could be caught. My heart was racing. I knew he was planning to end humanity since the beginning. I knew this, but it felt different knowing just how it was going to happen. My family flashed in my mind, my mother wailing in terror, my father clinging to her protectively, my brother standing frozen among the chaos, and all of them being torn apart. I can't stop it. I can't stop it. Don't miss Mila's next hunting moment. Subscribe to stay updated.